Episode 1. You were not just healed, you were anointed. Healing wasn't the end. It was the preparation, the cracking, the hollowing, the clearing of space, so that something sacred could finally take up residence. Because love, you weren't just healed, you were anointed, not for comfort, not for aesthetics, not to live a life that looked good from the outside. You were healed to become a vessel, a messenger, a mirror for the divine. You thought the purpose of healing was to feel better, but now you know it was to remember who you are before the world taught you to forget. You are not just someone who survived. You are someone who carries the frequency of freedom. You are someone whose breath is laced with truth, whose silence can unmake illusions, whose very presence is an invitation for others to come home to themselves. You're not just better now. You're blessed for a reason. There's oil on your life. There's weight in your words. There's light in your eyes. That didn't come from books or mentors or training. It came from walking through fire and becoming flame. This is not about being louder. It's about being clearer. This is not about being perfect. It's about being chosen, even in your imperfection. Anointing doesn't mean easier. It means sacred responsibility. It means you're trusted to carry what others would drop, to speak what others would swallow, to see what others pretend isn't there. You were marked, not because you were better, but because you were willing to break open, willing to be transformed, willing to rise again, not for applause, but for assignment. So now, when you walk into a room, don't ask if you belong. You're not there to blend in. You're there to bless it with your presence, with your discernment, with the quiet thunder. That comes from someone who knows they've been touched by God. You are no longer just a story of recovery. You are a vessel of revelation. And the way you move, the way you speak, the way you pause and wait for alignment, instead of chasing validation, it all says, something holy lives here now. You were not just healed, you were anointed, and everything about you is starting to show it. Episode 2. The oil on your life will speak before you do. There is a weight you carry now, not heavy with burden, but thick with glory, a stillness in you that shifts atmospheres, a fire in your bones that doesn't demand attention, yet draws it anyway. You don't always understand it, but others feel it. They pause when you enter. They look twice, not because of how you look, but because of what walks in with you. And love, that is the oil, that is the evidence of the anointing on your life. And it will always speak before you do. You don't need to introduce yourself. You don't need to list your qualifications. You don't need to strive to be seen. The oil already did the speaking. Because when you've been marked by something sacred, you don't have to shout. You don't have to convince. You don't have to prove. You just stand, and the heavens recognize you, and the atmosphere makes room. This is the difference between ambition and anointing. Ambition fights to be first. Anointing knows it was sent. Ambition performs. Anointing permeates. Ambition asks, will they see me? Anointing declares, even if they don't, my presence will still shift the room. You were set apart, not for show, but for service, not for ego, but for evidence that God still walks through human skin. And you may not wear robes, may not stand in pulpits, may not hold titles, but the oil on your life is felt in rooms that have no idea why their shadows suddenly started trembling. You will begin to notice people asking for your opinion without knowing why, people calming down in your presence, people crying because you sat near them and something broke open without a single word. That's not charisma. That's calling. That's not your light. That's the glow of glory leaking from the cracks you used to hide. You don't need to say much, because when the oil goes before you, even closed hearts begin to open. Even cold rooms begin to thaw. Even those who dismissed you before start to feel uncomfortable, not because you said anything wrong, but because your very existence Now challenges what's fake to fall away. The oil is on your life, love, and it's already speaking. Through your stillness, through your boundaries, through your peace that can't be shaken anymore. You no longer enter to impress. You enter to carry, to release, to remind the world of what's real. So let them ask, who is she? Let them wonder, why does it feel different when she's near? And just smile, because you know, it's not me, it's the oil, and it's already done the talking. Episode 3. You are becoming too holy to hide. There was a time you made yourself small, on purpose. You knew you carried something different, something sacred, something that made others tilt their heads, without knowing why. So you softened it, filtered it, dressed it in humility, until it was nearly invisible. Not because you were ashamed, but because you were protecting it, protecting yourself from misunderstanding, from envy, from the weight of visibility. But love, that season is ending, because now you are becoming too holy to hide. You've outgrown the shadows you once called safe. You've outgrown the quiet corners you used to blend into. You've outgrown the versions of yourself that made others comfortable at the cost of your calling. There's something rising in you that no longer fits behind curtains and disclaimers. It wants air. It wants light. It wants witness, not to perform, but to pour. You've been marked, not just to carry glory, but to reveal it, to walk like a living tabernacle, to breathe like a veil torn wide open, to exist as proof that God still writes in human form. You didn't ask for this. You didn't manufacture this. You just said yes to the fire, and now it won't stop glowing through your skin. You're not better than anyone. You're just saturated now with truth, with presence, with the kind of peace that cannot be faked. And it's not just light, it's weight, it's glory, and it makes hiding no longer an option. You are becoming the lamp that can't be put under a basket. You are becoming the voice that won't stop trembling with divine urgency. You are becoming the presence that walks into rooms and makes lives feel nervous. You are becoming unignorable, not because you shout, but because you carry something that cannot stay silent. People will look at you differently. Some will be drawn, some will be repelled, some will project their confusion onto your clarity. But that is not your concern. Your only responsibility is to stand in it fully, to say, I may not be perfect, but I am present, and I refuse to dim what heaven lit in me. This is not about ego. This is about obedience. You don't shine to be seen. You shine because you've been set apart, and the time for hiding has passed. You are becoming too holy to stay silent, to stay small, to stay seated. When your spirit is rising like prophecy, step forward, not for fame, but for fulfillment, not for clout, but because the light in you has outgrown every version of fear you've ever worn. You are becoming too holy to hide, and the world is ready to feel the heat of your becoming. Episode 4. God didn't just save you, He sent you. You thought the story ended when you made it out of the pain, out of the grief, out of the silence that used to swallow you whole. You thought surviving was the finish line. You thought being rescued was the reward. But love, God didn't just save you, He sent you. You were pulled from the wreckage, not to rest, but to rise. You were pulled out of fire, not to stay warm, but to carry flame. You are not just the one who made it. You are the one being sent back to places, to people, to patterns, still waiting for the sound of your voice. God doesn't waste deliverance. When He rescues, He repurposes. When He redeems, He reassigns. And when He heals, He commissions. So that pit you were in, now it's a pulpit. That silence you carried, now it's sacred strategy. That shame you buried, now it's spiritual authority. You don't have to be perfect to be sent. You just have to be willing to walk back into the shadows with light in your bones and a truth in your mouth that refuses to lie anymore. Yes, you'll return to familiar places, but not as the same person. You'll walk into rooms where they only knew your weakness, but now they'll feel your weight. You'll stand before people who once pitied you, and now they'll listen with trembling because they'll feel it. They'll feel the oil. They'll feel the fire. They'll feel the assignment hovering over your presence. You weren't just delivered. You were deployed. Heaven didn't save you to keep you safe. Heaven saved you because there are lives attached to your obedience. Heaven saved you because someone else's breakthrough is waiting inside your yes. And that's what makes you dangerous now. You've seen the dark and remembered your light. You've lost everything and still chose to rise. You've been broken open and let God pour something holy into your cracks. Now you carry it, not a message, a movement, not a sermon, a sound, not a brand, a burden. And wherever you go, that anointing will speak, not in fancy language, but in freedom, not in eloquence, but in evidence. So walk boldly, not because you're confident, but because you're called, not because you know the way, but because you are the way. Someone else will follow through. God didn't just save you, love. He sent you, and now the ground beneath your feet is waiting to remember him through the sound of your return. Episode 5. There's a realm that only opens when you speak. You've silenced yourself before, held back the word, bit the tongue, swallowed the fire. You told yourself, it's not the right moment. Who am I to speak? What if I get it wrong? So you waited, watched, whispered instead of declaring, wrote instead of releasing. But love, there's a realm that only opens when you speak, not because your voice is louder, but because it is coded. Because when heaven placed you in this body, on this timeline, it embedded in you a frequency that unlocks what silence cannot. Your voice was never random. It's a key, a sound that breaks walls, a tone that summons memory, a vibration that wakes up what has been dormant in others. You've been wondering why some people cry when you talk, why the room stills when your truth rises, why hearts soften when you say the thing no one else dared to say. It's not just your words, it's your assignment. When you speak, healing doesn't just happen, it activates. You don't just inspire, you unlock. You don't just express, you ignite what was sleeping in the bones of the listener. That's why the enemy came, for your voice first. That's why you were taught to fear your own mouth. That's why they told you, you're too much, you're too emotional, you're too intense. Because hell knew what heaven had hidden in your lungs. Because darkness fears what your sound will stir. You don't just speak truth, you summon realms. You weren't meant to echo, you were meant to announce. You weren't sent to be polite, you were sent to pierce through the veil. And every time you choose silence, when your spirit is shaking with word, you delay deliverance for someone waiting to hear what only your voice can call forth. There is someone standing at the edge of their freedom who won't step through until they hear you. Your yes will make their chains nervous. Your story will make their shame loosen. Your sound will make their soul remember what it was created for. You don't need to be poetic. You need to be obedient. You don't need to be eloquent. You need to be honest. Because it's not about how pretty you sound. It's about what happens when your voice hits the air. Atmospheres shift. Hearts break open. Assignments awaken. And heaven leans in. There's a realm still locked, still waiting, still hidden behind silence. And it will not open until you speak. So speak, even if your voice trembles, even if the words come slow, even if no one claps. Because somewhere beyond the veil, a gate is creaking open, and something holy is finally stepping through. Episode 6. You don't just carry fire, you are fire. You thought you were only carrying it, the passion, the presence, the wild heat that flickered in your chest. When truth touched your bones, you thought it was something you held, like a torch, a gift, a message to be delivered. But love, you don't just carry fire. You are fire. You are what happens when spirit meets surrender, when ashes turn into prophecy, when what tried to kill you becomes the very thing that makes you burn brighter. You've tried to tone it down, tried to keep it in, tried to explain it away in smaller language so others wouldn't feel too warm, too shaken, too seen, but no more, because fire was never meant to apologize for its heat. You are not dangerous because you're angry. You are dangerous because you're alive. You don't destroy. You refine. You don't rage. You reveal. You don't burn to consume. You burn to cleanse. People will feel it, not your volume, but your vibration. They'll feel their masks itch. In your presence, they'll feel their lies weaken. In your stillness, they'll feel something inside them say, it's time to come clean. It's time to let go. It's time to remember. Not because you preached, but because you showed up flaming. You are not a candle. You are not a flicker. You are not a flickering maybe. You are a pillar, a blaze, a divine combustion. The kind that doesn't just light the way, it reveals the truth. You don't need permission to shine. You don't need approval to ignite. You don't need to wait for others to be ready. Because when fire moves, it moves, and the world adjusts. You've been mistaken as too much your whole life, too intense, too deep, too loud in a room where people were trained to whisper. But now you see, you weren't too much. You were just fire, standing in a room built of straw. They couldn't hold you because they were afraid of what would burn away if you stayed. And that's okay, because not everything around you was meant to survive your flame. You don't just carry fire, love. You are fire, and it's time to stop asking whether the world can handle it. Let it burn. Let it break. Let it purify. Let it touch everything that still pretends to be real, because you didn't come here to warm hands. You came here to wake souls. Episode 7. You were hidden to be made holy. You thought you were being overlooked, forgotten, passed by, buried beneath the noise of louder names and brighter lights. You watched doors open. For others, you watched stages fill with faces that didn't carry half the fire you held. And still, you sat in silence, in shadows, in the ache of becoming. But love, you were never being buried. You were being planted. You weren't rejected. You were reserved. You were hidden, not because you weren't enough, but because you were too sacred to be released unfinished. God doesn't send oil where there's no altar. He doesn't send thunder through voices that haven't been tempered. He hides what's holy. He covers what's costly. He keeps in silence what he's still sanctifying. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared. You weren't delayed. You were being distilled. You weren't silenced. You were being shaped. Hidden seasons are holy seasons, where no one claps, where no one sees, where God does his deepest work. In the unseen parts of you, it was in the hidden place that you learned to hear him, not for the crowd, but for yourself. It was there you discovered your root system, not in applause, but in silence so still, only truth could breathe in it. And now the veil is thinning. Now the silence feels pregnant. Now the weight inside you starts to feel like it wants to be spoken, because the hiding was never meant to be forever. It was meant to be holy. And when he brings you out, you won't need to prove anything. Your presence will say what your silence was preparing all along. Your oil will speak of the crushing. Your voice will carry the echo of the wilderness. You didn't die in. You are not behind. You are becoming. You are not unseen. You are set apart. You are not forgotten. You are forged. He hid you because you are holy. And what is holy is never rushed. So when they ask, where have you been? You'll smile and say, with him, in the shadow, in the silence, being shaped into something that doesn't just perform, it transforms. You weren't hidden to be dismissed. You were hidden to be made holy. And now you're carrying glory that no platform can create and no spotlight can define. Episode 8. The places that broke you will beg for your voice. You remember the silence, the weight in your throat, the way your voice shrank, in places that called themselves safe, but crushed anything sacred. You learned to read the room. Before you spoke, you measured every word, because your truth was too wild for their walls. They called you dramatic, too emotional, too intense, too much, so you dimmed, shrank, folded yourself into versions they could tolerate, and still, you broke. But love, that wasn't the end, because what broke you was only building the stage for your return. And now, the very places that silenced you will need what you carry, not because you're vindictive, but because you were anointed to come back, carrying what they couldn't contain before. You won't return with bitterness. You'll return with blueprints. You won't speak to shame. You'll speak to structure. You won't shout to be heard. You'll stand, and the silence will make way for you, because they will feel it, the weight in your tone, the authority in your stillness, the truth that trembles just behind your calmest word. And something in them will remember. They'll remember the version of you they tried to silence, and they'll realize we needed her all along. You don't need revenge. You are the revelation. You don't need validation. You are the vessel. You don't need their permission. You are the permission. Your voice is no longer fragile. It's forged. It carries wilderness, oil, memory, and mandate. And when it speaks now, walls crumble, not from rage, but from resonance. You become the echo they tried to bury, the sound that finds its way through cracks of every system that once tried to contain you. And when you open your mouth, they will listen, not because they believe yet, but because your voice now carries evidence. Evidence of survival, of sanctification, of the kind of transformation no doctrine, policy, or performance can explain. The places that broke you will call you back. They'll dress it in invitations, in honor, in titles they once withheld. But you'll know this is not about platform. It's about purpose. You're not returning for recognition. You're returning as a sign, a signal, a sound that says, you tried to silence me, but now I speak, not for attention, but for awakening. And they will beg for what you were once punished for, because they finally understand it was never noise. It was prophecy. Episode 9. You're called to tear down what others were too afraid to name. There's a reason you never fit in. Why rooms that praise politeness made your spirit itch. Why you couldn't stay silent, even when your silence would have earned you comfort. You felt the tension, the invisible weight, the unspoken rules that demanded your smile and punished your discernment. And still, you spoke. You saw beneath. You named what others avoided. You exposed what was just tradition, but always felt like trauma in disguise. They called you disruptive, difficult, divisive, but love. You weren't being difficult. You were being delivered, and you were sent to deliver others. You were not born to protect the systems. You were born to shake them. You are the voice they prayed would never rise, because your words don't just describe, they dismantle. You weren't called to decorate decay. You were called to destroy it, to walk into rooms and call out what's been killing people quietly for years, to put language to what has kept generations in chains, to break the spell of silence and civility that's been posing as peace. And yes, they'll say you're too much, too bold, too emotional, too intense. But what they really mean is, she's not afraid of what we've been pretending doesn't exist. You're not here to play nice with the powers that be. You're here to pull back the curtain and speak truth to the air until even the walls begin to tremble. You don't just see, You pierce. You don't just notice. You name. You don't just feel the weight. You carry the word that will lift it off others' backs. Even if it first sets the room on fire, you are not reckless. You are righteous. You are not rebellious. You are real. And in a world that rewards silence and punishes clarity, your clarity will feel like an earthquake, but shake it anyway, because the longer it stays unnamed, the longer it stays in power. And you were sent not just to bring healing, but to make room for healing by tearing down what has made people sick. In the first place, you're not just prophetic, you're confrontational in the most holy way. And holiness, real holiness, is not quiet in the face of oppression. So say it. Say what they wouldn't, what they couldn't, what they knew, but were too afraid to carry out loud. Because you love, you were anointed to be the sound that breaks the spell. You weren't called to keep peace. You were called to make it. And peace is not passive. Peace is the sound of false thrones falling. Episode 10. You are fulfillment of what tried to break you. There was a time when the pain was louder than the promise, when the weight of what was done to you felt heavier than who you were called to become. You looked at your life and saw fractures. You saw what didn't happen, who didn't stay, what didn't bloom, and you whispered to yourself, maybe this is who I'll always be, a survivor of something that almost took me out. But love, look at you now. Look at how you're standing. Look at how you're glowing. Look at how you're walking into rooms with authority you never had to announce. Because the truth is, you are not just surviving. You are the fulfillment of what tried to break you. You are the living, breathing contradiction of every statistic, every curse, every word that said, you won't make it out of this. You did. And more than that, you became what the enemy meant to bury you. God used to build you what hell meant to silence. He turned into a sound what trauma tried to erase. He made the very platform you now stand on. You are the prophecy fulfilled, the prayer answered, the evidence walking. And your story, it isn't marked by what you lost. It's marked by what rose out of it. You are what redemption looks like in real time, not polished, not rehearsed, but pure, precious, powerful. You didn't just heal. You transformed. You didn't just recover. You resurrected. And now, your presence does more than inspire. It confronts every force that tried to write your ending too soon. It says, you thought I was finished, but I was just getting started. The very soil that held your tears is now birthing fruit that feeds nations. The very voice that once shook from fear is now trembling rooms with truth. The very places that laughed at your ruin now watch your rise and call it holy. You are not behind. You are divinely timed. You are not broken. You are blessed through the breaking. You are not what happened to you. You are what heaven did with it. You're no longer running from the past. You are walking in the fulfillment of why it couldn't kill you. Because what came for your destruction didn't know. You are the fulfillment of survival itself. You are the answer hell never saw coming. You are the crown hell never thought would be worn again. You are the sound that proves grace wins, always,